Labor MPs and senators have agreed the ban on live cattle exports to Indonesia should stay in place until abattoirs meet international standards. Party members unanimously passed the motion at this morning's caucus meeting, but it doesn't go as far as some MPs wanted. For more, I'm joined by our political editor, Lyndall Curtis. So, Lyndall, what was it like in that caucus meeting this morning?
Well, I gather there was still quite a lot of debate, as there was at the previous caucus meeting, about the live cattle exports to Indonesia, although maybe tempered a little bit by the actions that the Agriculture Minister Joe Ludwig has taken since that meeting was held. A motion was agreed. One of those who drafted the original motion and had a hand in the redraft of the motion is Victorian Labor MP Kelvin Thomson, and he joins me now. Kelvin Thomson, welcome to News 24.
Good afternoon, Lyndall.
Now, this motion is not as strong as the one you originally put up, is that fair to say?
Well, the motion reflects steps taken by the Australian government since we drafted the initial resolution, and I think it's a motion that represents a great step forward for animal welfare in Australia. It is a tribute to the work of animal welfare groups, to my parliamentary colleagues, and to all those Australians who expressed great concern after the revelations on the Four Corners program of animal cruelty.
But under this motion, live cattle export trade to Indonesia could start again under international standards, not the stronger Australian standards?
It could start again. It's my view that the government should be under no hurry or not under pressure to resume it any time soon. I believe that the suspension is functioning very well in terms of the flurry of activity we've seen recently. So I think that the Indonesian government and the industry will be working hard to lift animal welfare standards in that country. And secondly, it's an opportunity for the industry to look at domestic animal processing and building or rebuilding that industry. I think there's been too great a focus on live exports in recent times, and we can rebuild the domestic animal processing industry in Northern Australia and elsewhere, which will be both good for the economy and good for animal welfare.
But is it true that the cattle trade could start again using the international standards even before the farmer review has had time to report, and that it's that farmer review which you would like to see lead to the imposition of the tougher Australian standards?
I understand there'll be some debate about the question of international standards versus Australian standards, but it's certainly my expectation, I think the expectation of my parliamentary colleagues and the Australian people, that we will never again see live cattle being exported to Indonesia and being killed without being stunned first. It is our expectation that proper standards will be in place for any abattoir which is to receive Australian cattle.
Will this caucus motion, this agreed caucus motion, ease the concerns of all caucus members, or are there some people who would want to ban the live cattle trade outright?
There may be caucus members who wish to ban it outright. What this motion reflects is all of the caucus coming together and having some input and some discussion about the best way forward. So there was agreement about the motion this morning, and it represents a very significant step forward. And I think that the Australian government and the caucus can be proud of the steps that have been taken.
There was also some talk today about how much role backbenchers or caucus MPs should have in public debate about public policy. Do you believe that caucus backbenchers, that Labor backbenchers, have a role to play in debate about public policy, even if they're not necessarily towing the party line?
I believe they do. I think that we've all got a responsibility to say what we think about issues. It's a great privilege to be a member of the Australian Parliament, and I think that those of us who have that privilege have both the opportunity and the obligation to say what we think about the issues of the day.
Even if that means that there is talk of splits or people diverting from the party line if you express your view outside the caucus process?
Well, if no one's prepared to express a view, we would remain locked absolutely where we are forever. George Bernard Shaw said, the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man insists on adapting the world to suit him. Therefore, all progress depends on the unreasonable man. So I think from time to time people have to say what they think in order that we have public policy development and public policy debate.
And in this minority parliament, every vote's important. Is this the start of caucus taking a stronger role in the development of public policy?
I think caucus is keen keen to take a role in the development of public policy, and I'm sure that will happen as various issues arise. That's our opportunity and our obligation.
There are some people who have suggested that that caucus is prepared to take a stance on live cattle exports, but not so prepared to take a stance on the question of taking asylum seekers to Malaysia. Do you think that's a fair point?
No, I don't. I think that members of the caucus have expressed views about this issue both inside and outside the caucus for a very long time. The treatment of refugees and asylum seekers has been on the Australian political landscape as far back as Tampa in 2001, indeed in some respects even prior to that. And right throughout that period, my parliamentary colleagues have expressed their views, sometimes within the caucus, sometimes publicly, and I'm sure that debate will continue.
Are MPs waiting till you see the shape of the deal with Malaysia?
In some respects, yes, Linda. I think it's unfair to always ask us, are you in favour of this outcome or are you against the outcome when some of the detail is unknown? So I suspect that a lot of people are appropriately waiting and seeing to see the final shape of the package. And
finally, the Prime Minister also talked about putting the party reform ideas before the Labor Party conference at the end of the year. Should there be public discussion ahead of that, though, on what ideas are possible if you want to engage the public and to encourage them to join up to the Labor Party?
Well, there will be a debate about party reform, but I share some of the Prime Minister's concerns about the impact of too much navel-gazing. I think what people are after is good policy, and if we provide to the Australian people good policy, we will get support from the Australian people. That's really what they want, rather than essentially internal discussions about our structures and processes.
Kelvin Thomson, thank you very much for your time.
Good to talk with you.
And back to you, Joe.
Little Curtis, for more details.